Welcome to the 5th Annual Take Back America Conference. My name is Robert Borosage. On behalf of the Campaign for America's Future, I welcome you to this city. I welcome you to this movement. I applaud what you've already done, and I know that you're ready to take back America because you've already started. This week, you will number nearly 3,000 activists and leaders from the progressive movement from over 40 states, from across the tribes. Labor will be here, Move On will be here, U.S. Action and Acorn will be here. A range of groups from the hip-hop generation to the Code Pink to the seniors, they'll all be here. The progressive movement gathering in its many faces, in its many ages, in its many tribes, coming together to take back this country. Now, 5 years ago, when we started this venture, see if this works, this place was occupied territory. DeLay in the House, Frist in the Senate, Bush in the White House, Rove in the catbird seat, Libby at Command Central, and Cheney at an undisclosed location. We warned then that they would weaken America, and they did. And we promised then that we would build an independent progressive movement that could take back our country, and we did. And now, DeLay is gone, Rove's lost his genius, Libby's lost his case. Libby won't apologize, but he does say one thing quite frequently, which you can imagine is, "Pardon me." Bush is such a lame duck that the Republican candidates for president can't seem to recall his name in debates. And Cheney, well, Cheney is so divorced from reality every time he appears and says something that it's becoming clearer and clearer that undisclosed location, that's the attic where they lock up the crazy relatives. They are done. This conservative era is at its ash end. This is our time. We meet, I believe, at a time historians will mark as a historic turn. The conservative era that has dominated our politics over the last quarter century has come to its end. We now begin to struggle about what comes next. And that struggle will not be easy. It will be fiercely contested. This will be our time, but only if we make it so. Now let me state my proposition here. Conservatives have failed. Their policies have been ruinous. Their political project, Karl Rove's enduring conservative majority on the right, that's collapsed. Americans in large numbers are looking for a way forward, and we have to step up. We have to be bold enough to lead, to put forth a bold reform governing agenda for this country that meets its problems, to build an ever more powerful independent movement, independent of both parties, of increasing sophistication and capacity, and then to consolidate a new majority, an enduring majority for progressive reform. Let me look at each of these propositions in turn. The right got it wrong. Over the past 6 years, they controlled everything, and they basically had their way with catastrophic effect. Iraq, Katrina, Enron, Shivo and stem cells, the assault on Social Security, the growing inequality, an economy that doesn't work for working people. The signature failures of this administration can be traced back directly and must be traced back directly to the conservative ideas and the conservative ideologues and think tanks that championed them. With the wrong diagnosis, they prescribed a dangerous medicine that was not good for our health. What we have here is a problem of false labeling, which is probably why conservatives have defunded the FDA. Here's a decent summary of the dial-tested, focus-grouped, message-massaged mantra of the conservative movement. Small government, lower taxes, strong military, family values, you know the drill. It sounds good. It's meant to sound good. It's been tested to sound good. But in actually existing conservatism, which we have experienced over the last 25 years from Reagan through Bush, these labels cover a poisonous brew. A crippled government, trickle-down economics that doesn't trickle down, increased personal risk, military adventurism with an imperial presidency, and the results can be catastrophic. Let me give you an example. We know that conservatives scorn government. Here's Grover Norquist, the conservative activist, vowing that he'll cut it so small that we could drown it in a bathtub. And before Bush even took office, conservatives looked at the Federal Emergency Management Association and they said, this is a bloated entitlement program. If you live in an area of risk, you should self-insure. And so when Bush came into office, he cut FEMA's budget, he booted it out of the cabinet, he stocked it full of his cronies. He watched as the pros left in dismay, and when Katrina hit, the saints did not come marching in. Only it wasn't government that ended up drowning. Now, this is what educators call a teachable moment. But you do have to teach it, because you're not going to hear any of this from conservatives. They are too busy cutting and running from the Bush debacle. Conservatives, Newt Gingrich wrote, did not lose in 2006. Republicans did. They lost because they were not conservative enough. Gingrich, in a sort of Winn-Dixie version of Chairman Mao, has offered the 4 C's of conservative failure: a dearth of competence and candor, a surplus of corruption and consultants. And he's got a point. But characteristically, he left out the biggest C of all: conception or misconception. Conservatives failed not simply because they are corrupt, and of course they are, not simply because they were incompetent, and we saw a lot of incompetence. They failed because they get the world wrong. Their ideas are wrong and cannot meet the challenges we face. And we have to teach this lesson over and over and over again so that Americans learn it. Now, luckily, Americans have had enough. This is Bush's approval rating. It is slightly above Richard Nixon when he left the White House under dint of impeachment. Over half the country now says they've simply given up on the Bush presidency, turned their back on it. If you ask them how many wish Bush would give up on his presidency, I'm sure the numbers would be much higher. People get it. They know that, as Peggy Noonan, Reagan's speechwriter, wrote, the wheels are coming off the trolley, and the trolley is coming off the track. A stunning 3 out of 4 Americans now say we are fundamentally on the wrong track, and they are looking for a different direction. You got to wonder who those right track people are. You know, there's CEOs, and there's the board of directors of the CEOs, and there's some Wall Street bankers and the people who won the lottery. But is that 25% of the country? The rest apparently aren't paying attention. But Americans, when they're looking for something, are not neutral. They are moving our way, and it's important for us to understand it and to grasp this moment. On issue after issue, Americans stand with us in large majorities, whether it's the war in Iraq, the move to alternative energy, the demand for access for health care, much preferred over maintaining Bush's tax cuts, the sense that the wealthy and the corporations are paying too little taxes and that we have to invest more in education and health care and alternative energy and the things that are vital to our future, the role of government. We have just released a report done in conjunction with Media Matters that lays out, using the most neutral polling data possible, the attitudes of Americans on a whole range of issues: on the war, on foreign policy, on security, on economics, on the role of government, on social issues. And you will be stunned to see the conventional wisdom has this wrong. This is not a conservative country. This is a country that is open and, in fact, is looking for a progressive alternative. And in 2006, these opinions took electoral form. This election was a stunning repudiation of the right. New Democratic majorities in the House and the Senate, new governors, 322 more state legislative seats, new majorities in 10 state legislatures, both houses controlled by Democrats in 23 states. Democrats won up and down the ticket with a mandate to end the war, to clean out the corruption, and to challenge the failed economic policies. And I would argue to you that the Congress, to some extent, heard this message. They've begun the repair. They passed the first, really to the amazement, I believe, of most people looking at this Congress coming into office, under remarkable leadership by Pelosi and Reid, they passed the first bill that got to the president's desk that called for moving the troops out of Iraq at a date certain. He vetoed that. Republicans stayed united in support of his veto. It was impossible to overturn, but the debate has begun. They passed the first increase in the minimum wage in a decade. They've added money for children's health care. They've begun the first limited steps to lobby reform. They're headed into a major battle over priorities, with Bush threatening to veto any spending that increases investment in homeland security, in children's health, in education, in affordable college, or in renewable energy. But repair is not enough. We expect more, we should demand more, and we need more. We need vision. We need a broad range of new agenda items. And for that, we have to break the conservative shackles on this debate. We have to gird ourselves for many fierce battles against very entrenched big interests. We have to put together now a bigger and bolder agenda for our future. And I'm going to spend a little time talking about this. I want to focus on, it's a long agenda when you think about the damage they've done, but I want to focus on three areas. First, we desperately need a new real security strategy. One that will defend our people, that will respect and reflect our values, that will respect our Constitution, and that will fit our pocketbook. Ending the disastrous occupation in Iraq is the first step, and that will be a debate that will drive politics over the next year. And the public is with us on this in increasing numbers, but understand this is not going to be an easy debate. It is very hard for a great nation to come to grips with an utterly failed war and occupation. And this debate is going to be posed in this next election, and we should be ready for it. You should not assume it's won. Americans are just starting to struggle with this recognition, and we have to lead them in a process to understand that our security, our values, our future depends on bringing that misbegotten debacle to an end. But ending the war in Iraq is not enough. That's right. The United States now polices the world. We spend 45% of the world's military budget. We have 737 bases in over 130 countries. Yet, as the new policy document that will be released this afternoon by the Institute for Policy Studies argues, not one of the real security threats that we face, stateless terror and al-Qaeda, catastrophic climate change, nuclear proliferation, global pandemics, failed states and mass desperation, none of these have a military answer. And yet, the leading presidential candidates in both parties, are united in being for increasing the amount of money we put into our military and increasing its ability to go places and do things. We have to challenge the limits of this debate. Second, we need a shared prosperity agenda. We have an economy. If you talk to the economists, they say it's great. Treasury Secretary said this is one of the best economies in our history. Profits are up. Productivity is up. Stock market's up, CEO salaries are soaring, but workers are working harder and longer simply to stay even. This year, more women will declare bankruptcy than will graduate from college. We need to change the course of this economy. Now, we've passed an increase in the minimum wage. We're gearing up fights on paid sick days. Tomorrow, we're going to rally for the Employee Free Choice Act, an act that is essential if workers are to gain the fundamental human right to bargain, to organize and bargain collectively. That is the only mechanism that we have invented that in fact allows workers to gain a fair share of the profits and the productivity that they help to generate. And if we have an economy that is without unions, will be an economy that suffers the Gilded Age inequality that we now see. This is a critical reform if we are going to sustain and build a broad middle class that is America's triumph. But even this is not enough. We need a strategy for this nation in a new global economy. We're running the largest trade deficits in the annals of time. We have an economy that is dependent on the kindness of strangers, primarily Chinese and Japanese central bankers. We have a high-tech trade deficit now with China, and our leading export to China is waste paper. This can't be sustained. We need a trade strategy now that is not for the multinationals, but that is for this country, for this nation. We need an investment strategy that will rebuild America. And over the next month, we are going to campaign, and the campaign particularly is going to campaign for a centerpiece of this agenda, of this strategy. And that is the concerted drive for energy independence, like that called for by the Apollo Alliance. The transition to clean energy is an environmental imperative, but it is much more than that. This is the largest growth and jobs agenda since the move to the suburbs at the end of World War II. Invest in conservation, put people to work in our cities. Develop alternative clean energy, revitalize our science and technology, build new manufacturing industries, capture the green industries that will be the growing markets of the future, unleash the imaginations of our young. We will end our dependence on Persian Gulf oil. We will address catastrophic climate change. We will cut over $100 billion a year from our trade deficit. We can create 3 million new jobs over the next 10 years and clean our air to boot. And with the growth it generates, it'll actually pay for itself. This is an imperative that is about our future that we have to get done now. Third, we have to save the American dream. Corporations are now shredding the social contract, the private social contract, that was the building block for the American middle class. Stable jobs that paid family wages, had paid vacations, health care, pensions. They're gone. Soon, 1/4 of all of our jobs will be contingent, part-time or short-term, with no benefits. Right now, fewer than 30% of young workers have any help for retirement from their employers. Older workers are stunned by the broken promises of the corporations on their pensions. Younger workers never get the promise at all. Now, conservatives have a response for this. Good luck. You're on your own. Health care, we'll give you a tax break for a health savings plan. On your own. Education for your children, here's a voucher. It'll pay a piece of it. Retirement, better save your money. We'll give you a savings account. You take the risk. You're on your own. Lots of luck. We have to build a common good response to this. We are all in this together. And over the next 2 years, the next 3 years, we begin with the epic struggle to fix our broken health care and to provide affordable, comprehensive health care for all Americans. Already in this election, progressive movements have pushed candidates to lay out plans for affordable health care for all. But even that's not going to be enough. We need an investment agenda that provides just the basics in public education: preschool, small classes in the early grades, skilled teachers, after-school programs, affordable college. We need to invest in our environment and to transform it. We need to strengthen the worker, consumer, and environmental protections that have been shredded over the last 25 years. We have a large, big agenda to go on this. Now, none of this is going to be easy. But I want you to understand that we do have the power and the opportunity in this moment. We all know that the entrenched interests that defend the status quo are very powerful, and they know how to play the game. I can tell you that in this city, the price of Democratic lobbyists is soaring. You can't get to clean energy without taking on big oil.
That's right.
You can't get to affordable health care without taking on big pharma and the insurance companies. You can't get to an economics that works for Main Street without taking on Wall Street. It isn't easy. But I would argue that we can build a movement, we are building a movement that can transform this country, that can take on these fundamental changes, these fundamental challenges. And what is exciting about this moment is that we are moving on up. Labor is here, and it has an expanded and aggressive education program that reaches out to 25% of the households that vote in the election. Move On is here. It now has 3.3 million members with increasing sophistication and ability to mobilize volunteers and to mobilize small contributions in large numbers. Americans United for Change is here, anchored in U.S. Action and ACORN and AFSCME and SEIU and our own campaign, and it is able to drive issues across this country. The progressive bloggers are here in large numbers, and they have taught us how to fight and how to confront the right. Progressive majority is here, electing candidates at the state and local level in states across the country, the next generation of Paul Wellstones. We are building a progressive infrastructure, not as well funded as the right, but increasingly able to compete in the battle of ideas. The Center for American Progress is here, Economic Policy Institute, IPS. Hell, Drinking Liberally is here. It has over 100 chapters in cities across the country. The tavern products of our founding fathers. And I'll tell you, a new and enduring progressive majority is in reach. If we can find common ground, we can build a progressive coalition that can in fact be a majority of Americans. These are the votes in 2006 of the building blocks of that coalition. Now, none of these votes can be inherited and they can't be assumed. But conservatives have turned the Republican Party into a regional party that is for whites only. And we can make that a weakness and build a broad coalition for change in this country. But we're not there yet. And we won't get there unless we stay on the move. This is the time for us to unfurl our sails. This is the time to run with the wind, to go with the current that's headed our way. This is not the time for timidity. I don't want to hear people talking about tacking to the elusive center. This is not time to trim our sails or duck our heads. This is our time. This is the time to claim the future. And you must feel, as Dr. King taught us, you must feel the fierce urgency of now. These moments are scarce. We have to grab this opportunity. And if we don't grab it, somebody else will, and they will take it in the wrong direction. And we must understand, as the movie showed that opened this thing, we've done this before against great odds. A century ago, at the start of the industrial age, the progressive and populist movements of the time took on the great industrial powers and the barons of wealth of that age. And they put out an agenda, they invented agenda from whole cloth about what a modern government would be to put limits around the new industrial economy and make it work for the broad sector of working people. The right to organize, the 8-hour day, the 40-hour week, they gave us the weekend. Worker protection, environmental protection, national parks, antitrust, the SEC, the Federal Reserve, they put together an entire structure. And in fact, at the end of the process, after World War II, we did create a broad middle class that is the triumph and pride of this country, and that middle class is now under threat in this new global economy. We have the same challenge. We can do it again. And my generation proudly was part of the movements, what I call the civilizing movements of our age, the civil rights movement, the women's movement, the environmental movement, that transformed our country and opened opportunity to millions. We can do this. We can take back America. It's up to us. Thank you.